First of all, we asked whether we would go to Parshat HaShavua or whether we would continue with what we've been doing, which is Chumash Be'Iyan in the middle of Sefer Bamidbar at this point. And the vote was 50-50, so you left it up to me. And what I've decided is something of a compromise, and that is that we're going to do Chumash Be'iyun through the rest of this session. And then Bezras Hashem, I'm going to talk to Rabbi Sam. Starting next year, I'll go back to Parshat HaShavua. So everyone will be hopefully pleased with the decisions. All right, we are now at a very, very important point in Sefer Bamidbar. And as an overview, just to review, take a look at the first section in your sheets. There is a structural overview to Sefer Bamidbar that is very clear to see. And that is, there are two turning points. Two turning points, very, very different turning points. The first is our departure from Har Sinai. And everything up until that point, everything up until the departure from Har Sinai is preparations in Bamidbar, preparations for that departure. And as I've said to you before, that departure is really the most important moment of revelation. It's the moment that determines what we're carrying with us. The Torah marks it with the upside-down nuns we spoke about. And therefore, that turning point was supposed to be majestic, was supposed to be a point where we're carrying the Torah with us from Har Sinai. We're now fully a nation. And yet, it turns into eventual disaster as one after another we have certain calamities, which lead finally to the second turning point. The second turning point is what we're going to look at today, and that is the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, which seals the fate of this particular generation. And what occurs as a result of Chet HaMeraglim, of course, is that this generation is doomed to die in the Midbar, and only their children will enter the land. So we're going to look at a number of points concerning the Chet HaMeraglim, and I think that although the sin is very familiar to us, I think there's a lot that's new that we can underscore. First of all, let's look at the overall problem that emerges when we look at events like this. We've spoken about it before, so I'll just do it briefly. How do we deal with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan A and plan B? You and I can have plan A and plan B, right? Because what we're trying to do is we're going to try to do plan A. If it doesn't work out, we're going to go to plan B. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows whether plan A is going to work from the start. And he can manipulate events to make it work. Why then do we have this unfolding drama in Bamidbar, where one generation fails, another generation succeeds, and it seems as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is changing course, changing his mind. Doesn't he know what's going to happen from the start? So these are very, very puzzling questions. They emerge over and over again in our studies, and there are a variety of different approaches. The approach that we're going to take is the following, and that is, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what's going to happen. And of course, he could have manipulated events so that plan A worked and that first generation went in. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to learn from our failures as well as from our successes. And he has to allow Bnei Yisrael to succeed or fail on their own, giving them free will, and then dealing with the ramifications of that success or failure. What we will see is that this generation just can't make the leap from slavery to freedom. That's really what it comes down to. This is turning point dooms them because they are still the slaves that left Egypt. And we're going to see how that emerges from and therefore what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to learn is he wants us to learn from the failure of plan A and the success of plan B, and hopefully we will carry those messages with us. Yes?
Before they left, we understand that they were on the 49th level of Tumah. While they were going through the desert, did that become less and less and less
Okay,
and less
so,
Tuma?
all right. So
Or
again,
did they keep going down to that 49th level? Or
okay, so the 49th level of Tuma, that emerges from Midrashic sources. In other words, it's not in the Torah. It doesn't say that they were on the 49th level of Tuma. So, but if we are going to look at the Midrashic sources, one would argue that as the Omer period unfolded, we were increasing in Kedusha, or the hope was that we would be increasing in Kedusha. So this was meant to be a time of growth. This was meant to be a time when we were celebrating and moving towards Har Sinai and then after Har Sinai. Okay.
then when they did things that were not good, did they go down levels?
I would assume they did. Again. In other words, I would put that aside and not ask that question at this point. I would just simply say, let's look at every event that happens. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want us to learn from that event? Do they succeed? Do they fail? And why? All right? Okay, now let's go back. Let's go now to the sin of the spies. Bnei Israel are standing at the border of Eretz Canaan. Where are they geographically? They are at the Negev area. In other words, they're going to be coming in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is having them come in from Egypt directly into Eretz Yisrael. Yehoshua won't come in that way eventually. Eventually, he'll come in across the Yarden. But this is where we are now. Spies are sent. First question that emerges, even before we get to the sin, whose idea was it to send the spies? You have two conflicting texts in the Torah. You have the text that unfolds while it's happening in Bamidbar, and that begins with HaKadosh Baruch Hu turning to Moshe and saying, and if you look at the bottom, I have it in English, Shlach lecha anoshim, send for yourself people, send. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is commanding us to send the spies. If you go to Sefer Devarim, and Sefer Devarim is in its entirety basically Moshe's farewell addresses to Bnei Israel, there he says that you came, all of you, Gravtem, Kulchem, you all came near to me, you all ganged up on me in a sense, and you said, we need to send spies, we need to send people out. So which was it? Was it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded it, or that Bnei Israel wanted it? The Torah really leaves that vague. Most Mefarshim will say that it's the text of Devarim that tells the full extent of the event, and that Shlach Lecha is a result of, because again, Shlach Lecha, you're requesting, it's not just Shlach, and therefore they requested. Which
is a command.
Shlach, right? Shlach is a command, but just like Lech Lecha, it's a commandment for your benefit. In other words, Shlach Lecha. And Chazal will say, in this case, it's a commandment because you're asking for it, as opposed to a commandment. And the Torah rabbis will say, and this is in the Daf Yomi recently, B'derech she'adam rotza lalachet, where on the road that a person wants to go, that's the road that God will lead us on. And the example that they give is Bilam HaRasha, who is approached by the nobles of Midian and Moab to curse the Jews, and Hashem tells him not to, and he says, I can't do it. And then they come back again, and he says, I'll ask what Hashem says this time, and Hashem said, okay, if you want to go, go. So that's an example of, God's not going to control our actions. God is going to enable us to do what we decide to do. And sometimes it's to our detriment.
I'm wondering if that translates nicely into the Lech Lecha, that Abraham was clearly repulsed by the Avodah Zarah of his local hometown and felt he had to get out of here. And
all the Midrashim say so. The Torah doesn't say so, but one has to assume that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is choosing him for a reason, and very clearly, perhaps, because he's not finding the answers in the world around him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal himself to Avraham. So yes, one could argue that that's probably what occurred. All right, now let's go. One of the things, this is a bit of a stretch, but I often said to my community when we were talking about entry into Israel and involvement with Israel, that there are 2 points in the Torah where we're about to enter. The first one is Lech Lecha, the second is Shlach Lecha. When you send other people to do it, you're not going to succeed. It's when you do it that you succeed. So just a thought. That's a little homiletic twist. Now let's go on. If this was the idea of the Bnei Yisrael, then there's an additional question. Was it a sin to even ask for this? All right, and again, there is a debate among the Mefarshim. There will be those who will say this is a reasonable request. This is okay. There will be those that say, no, they should have trusted HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, you have this debate among the Mefarshim, how much do we trust, right? How much do we have to do? How much do we have to initiate? And it's a backwards and forwards tug, particularly in this case. Now let's go to the next sheet. All right, so now let's take a look at the instructions that Moshe gives to the spies. All right, very, very detailed, the Torah says. Vayishlach osam Moshe l'Toras Eretz Canaan. Moshe sends them to spy out, to search out the land of Canaan. Vayomer, and he says, Alu, as I told you, go up the Negev. Alisem es Har, that's referring, the rabbis say that's referring to Harei Yerushalayim. In other words, go up in that direction. And now look at what he says. Ureisem es haaretz mahi. Take a good look at the land and its nature. Ve'es ha'am hayoshev aleha, and the nation that is living upon it. Hachazaku harafeh. Are they strong? Are they weak? Hama'athu imrav. Are they many? Are they plentiful? Is there a whole lot of people, or is it sparsely populated? And the land, take a look at the land and see if it's good or bad. Are there trees, etc., etc. And you should bring back some fruit from the land. Now, this creates a problem, doesn't it? Right? Because Moshe Rabbeinu seems to be saying to them, take a good look at this land that God is promising to us and see if it's really good. See if it's really okay. And see, yes.
What does the hit chazak tem refer to?
His chazak, what?
The hit chazak tem.
That's a good question. Why does it say v'hit chazak tem? I'm not sure that when it says strengthen yourself and take the fruit of the land. It could be, that's the flow. So perhaps, I don't have a good answer, but perhaps the answer is that you're taking a risk when you're going to, it's a risk to even go spy out the land, as we see in the case of Yoshua. But here, you're not only going to spy the land, you're going to take something from the land out. Maybe that required a certain degree of chazak, of strength, perhaps.
Yes.
Yes.
May I just say, I think completely differently. I think the hit chazaktim is reflects you will become strengthened. When you see the land, you will become strengthened, and you should bring back some fruit as a proof of that.
Okay, that's
how
a
beautiful the country actually is.
okay. That's a very beautiful interpretation. That's certainly right. It's to tour. It's to see. Right.
You see the good when you tour.
Right. Very good. Very good. So just for the audience that's going, I'm going to repeat it now. She said that there's another way to understand v'his chazaktem, and this is moving to Moshe's benefit, is you will become strengthened by what you see, and then you will take priorities. And therefore, he's sort of saying to them, you're going to find what we expect to find. But nonetheless, these instructions are problematic because he is saying, tell us if it's good, tell us if it's bad, tell us if they're strong, tell us if they're weak. About So he's asking them to bring back an honest report as to what it is that they see, correct? Says the Ramban. If you take a look at the bottom, V'od ma'asu amaraglim. We're going to see the Meraglim did some bad stuff, but the Ramban starts off by asking, wait a minute, what did they do that was wrong? And the last line, V'chi almanas she'idu lo sheker shalachosam. Did Moshe send them to bring back a false report? They're telling what they saw. So what did they do that was wrong? So this is where we have to take a look at the text very, very carefully. And what we will see upon the return of the Meraglim is a 3-stage report, with each stage increasing in its problem, increasing in its danger. Negativity, thank you. Take a look at stage 1. Spies come back, Vayisabru lo vayomru, Banu el haaretz asher shalachtanu, v'gam zvas kolav udvashi v'zeh pirya. We went to the land that you told us to do. We toured the land, and we say it's indeed, it's a wonderful place. It's a beautiful land. It's flowing with milk and honey, and here is its fruit, and they show the fruit that they brought back. Efes ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz. However, the nation that lives in the land or that dwells in the land is very strong. Ve'arim b'tzurot gedolot ma'od, and the cities are greatly fortified. Ve'gam yilidei ha'anak ra'inu sham, and we saw the children of giants. Amalek yoshev be'eretz hanegev. Amalek's there, and they give a report for where the various nations in the land are as per Moshe's instructions. What are they doing wrong here? Why is this a problem? They're bringing back a detailed report responding to Moshe's instructions. Now, what's your name? I'm sorry. So if you're right, then Moshe was hinting this chazak, you will be strengthened, and he was trying to lead them a certain way, which is a very beautiful interpretation. But one way or the other, just looking at this initial response, why is this a problem?
It's only the negative.
Well, no, it's Banu el haaretz asher shalachtem gam zovas kolav. This is a beautiful land.
No, it said it was that, but what we saw, everything we saw,
Well,
the report is all negative.
that's what they saw, but they're responding to Moshe's request. Moshe said to them, tell us if the people are strong, tell us if they're plentiful, tell us if the...
Something good there.
All right.
It was their interpretation.
Was there? Okay. So there are a number of things to look at here. First, what?
I don't understand why if the people are powerful, why are the cities fortified? You usually fortify a city when you feel weak.
Oh, why are the cities, if the people are powerful, why do you also have fortified cities? I think the answer to that would be we have a strong army. They have a strong army, and they also have strong cities. They also are well fortified and defended. That would be difficult for us to conquer. All right, now let's take a look carefully at what's happening here, because you'll see if you look at stage 2 just briefly. Vayas Kalev esa Amel Moshe. Right away, Kalev, after hearing stage 1, what's Kalev's reaction? Oh no. Hey, be loyal to Moshe. Don't. So he sees the problem with their response. So we have to see the problem. So first of all, what word do they use for however? What does Ephes mean?
Nothing.
It's a nullification, right? It's but. So number one, as you said, they're moving into totally negative territory. And that Ephes is the cue that tells us that that's what's happening. Number 2, they change the direction of their job. What I mean by that is as follows. Moshe was basically saying to them, how do we do this? they return and they say whether or not we will do it. They change from spies who are looking for information to spies that are determining whether this is even a possibility. And it's like, for example, the rabbis say it's like someone who, a certain nobleman who wants to send his servant to get grapes. And the servant goes and he looks at the grapes and he says, no, they're too expensive, and he doesn't buy them. And he comes back. And the nobleman says, where are the grapes? He said, I figured, I made the decision that they were too strong. He said, I would have paid that. I wanted you to get the grapes under all circumstances. So what's happening here is they are moving away from their initial mission and moving into a territory that they were not asked to perform. All right, so, and that's why Kalev reacts the way he does.
Where's Yoshua over here?
What?
Where's Yoshua?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Why is it that Kalev speaks first and Yehoshua only joins him in? It's a very good question. A lot of commentary on it. It seems that they were different people, and Yoshua is not as out there as Kalev, it would seem. And Kalev is the first one to say, no, to disagree and to go against the majority. I mean, this is a very hard thing to do. You went in there with all these people, and you're going to be speaking against the majority. So Kalev stands up. Now, someone said something, I don't know, one of you said something, which also is an issue. And that is, not only are they moving into a different mission, changing the nature of their job, but they are also making their suppositions fact. In other words, they are saying, this is what we saw, and they don't say therefore yet. They don't say therefore yet, but they're turning their own responses or their own reactions into fact.
Just like every other journalist.
That's correct. All right. And by the way, this is, the comment was just like every other journalist. I'll go further than that. Just like every other person. All right. In other words, you think about it, when you decide your religious road. So everyone to the right of you is right. Everyone to the left of you is to the left. You're just right. You're in the center. You are where you are. Well, hold on a minute. Somebody else is going to look at your center and see something entirely different than you're seeing. So the minute you change your reactions into fact, you can't argue with it anymore. Okay. Perspective, correct. It's perspective and it's supposition. It's not clearly fact. Now let's go on. So that's stage number one. Stage number one is the injection of negativity and the reinterpretation of the task that they were sent to do. They overreach. Next.
Would it be they were set up in a trap because it's a challenge in Emunah?
Could it be it was a trap because it's challenge in Emunah? The answer is yes. But not set up as a trap. I would say they were challenged. This was a Kadosh Baruch Hu and we'll see how it develops. That where clearly they fell in the challenge that Kadosh Baruch Hu is, but it builds as we go. All right. Vayas Kalev esa'am Moshe. So Kalev right away, and by the way, another difference between Kalev and Yehoshua is that when Kalev stands up, he speaks politically. When the two of them speak up, they speak religiously. What do I mean by that? Vayas ha'am, what does Kalev do? He says, no, trust Moshe. Well, we should have said trust Hashem, right? So that happens later. But so you see, there are different personalities and there are different reactions. Now,
that Yoshua was known to be the
successor.
of Moshe, not the
Right.
successor yet for the tribe. So he was on Moshe's side already. They wouldn't have listened.
That's
to him
yeah, a good point. Good point, perhaps. Very good. But what was suggested is that if Yoshua stood up for Moshe, his a position would be suspect. In other words, that's who his mentor is. So therefore, okay. Now, Vayas Kalev el Ta'am el Moshe, Vayomer Alona Ale. No, we can do this. We can absolutely do this. Let's go. There, don't be afraid. And they respond, V'anashim asher alu imo, amru lo nuchala lo seloam, ki chazakhu mimenu. All right, so now they've really stepped over the line. This is stage 2. They're not just reporting back what? They're strong, they're this, they're that. Now they're saying, we can't do this. This can't be done. We're not able to do it. So that's stage 2. And stage 2 is the injection of the fact that according to their beliefs, but they don't say according to their beliefs, this is an impossible task. Hashem has set them up and put them in a position that they're bound to fail.
Stage 1, they don't actually say we can't go up. Because
No, they do not.
And the pasuk which begins by Yas Kaled seems to be the other way around. First, they should have said we can't do it.
Well, that's why I said. So what you have to understand, because of Kalev's reaction, are the dangers that were in stage 1. They were not as evident, but the very fact that Kalev reacts to stage 1 is an indication that stage 1 was problematic. And we've explored some of the potential problems, but he knows where they're going. And yes, now they show their true colors, right? Now they say, no, we can't do it, can't go in. That's stage 2. Stage 3. Oh, but actually stay with stage 2 for a minute. All right, stage 2, there's something else that I didn't bring up, and that is they say, Lo nuchala lo sel ha'am, ki chazakhu mimenu, because they are stronger than us. All right? According, Nechama Leibowitz points out that there's a double entendre in that word. That word could either mean than us or than him. All right? And therefore, what they're saying, Chazal say, is not only are they stronger than us, but they're more powerful than our God. That even if he's on our side, we can't do this.
Isn't it that they are disregarding Moshe's command? Because when they use the word, it gives them the message to go up and say, no. And then he says, and even though it's followed by picking the tree,
Right.
maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe the Chazaktam is a way of saying, you're going to feel a little weak after.
Right.
And with Chazaktam, you should.
Okay, correct. That's another interpretation for his chazaktem, and that is not that you will be strengthened, but that you should be strengthened, and be strong. And he's indicating that there's going to be a challenge. Right, strengthen yourselves. Right, correct. In other words, strengthen yourselves, and that could be a recognition of the shadow of challenge right off the bat. Okay, all right. Yes.
Amazing that they said this after seeing the niflos that Hashem did in Mitzrayim.
Correct. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to why that happens in a minute. But that's amazing. The correct question is, this is the nation that saw all of those miracles, right? So wouldn't they believe that a Kadosh Baruch Hu would be able to allow them to defeat new enemies?
They set out the Meraglim, but it says here that they reported evil among the Israelites. When a general sends out spies, they come back to him to report. They don't go on CNN and tell everybody.
Very good point. Very good point. The answer to that is they come back, and the Torah says they talk to Moshe in full view of the people. So you're suggesting maybe the spies should simply just come back and speak to Moshe alone and then interpret the events. Here, no, it's propaganda. Correct. It's public view. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, next, stage 3. And yes?
Just add one thing. There's a hint to the problem in that they brought grapes back and it said Eshkol. And Eshkol was one of the 3 advisors to Abram who told him, don't get a bris milah. So already with that,
All right, so
it's supposed to be, I don't know who says this.
that's a
but I
nice
read
medrash.
this, and I thought
Nice medrash that
that-
brought back Eshkol. All right,
that this is a hint that they're not going to be on the.
could be. Okay, all right. Now, let's go back now and take a look at stage 3. Vayotziu dibas haaretz asher taru osa. They brought back an evil report, right? Slander. This is where the rabbis will say they're guilty of lashon hara about the land, and there are all sorts of interpretations of what they're saying because the next line is very unclear. They say, "Eretz ocheles yoshveha." It's a land that eats its inhabitants. Now, what does that mean? They just said it was a beautiful land. They just said it was flowing with the milk and honey. How does it eat? So there are all sorts. The midrashic interpretation is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing them a favor. What was he doing? He was causing the giants to die while they were there so that everybody would be busy with the funerals so that spies wouldn't be noted. And what did they interpret? That everybody's dying here because this land kills them. All right, that's one interpretation. Another interpretation may be just simply this is a very, and we know this to be true, this is a land where it's not a given that you're going to produce. It's not a given that you're going to succeed. This is a land, the Torah will say that not only work hard, but Eini Hashem Elokecha ba, that Hashem has to be with you all the way through. This year, we had no difficult rain, right? In America, if it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. No big deal. Here, if it doesn't rain, it's really a problem. It's really a problem. So therefore, Eretz Ocheles Yoshveh on a Pashut Pshat level could simply mean, this is not an easy job. This is not an easy task. Even if we are successful in defeating our enemies, this land is going to challenge us. It's going to be a problem. And then they go on and they say, all the people we saw were giants, etc., etc. And then finally, and this is where I told you they're really turning their feelings into facts. Here, their interpretation of what they saw, they are reporting as fact. Just like I said, you said all reporters do, and I said all people do. All right? But most devastating of all are the final words of their report. What's the final words of their report? Vanehi ve'einenu kechagovim v'chein hayinu be'einehem. We were in our own eyes as insects, grasshoppers, and that's how they perceived us. Now, there's a Freudian slip centuries before Freud in that sentence, right? What's the slip?
They didn't have enough self-confidence.
We were in our own eyes as insects. We lost confidence. We saw ourselves as nothing, and then that's how they see us. That's how they saw us. It is an indication of a total loss of confidence in our ability. Once we see ourselves as grasshoppers, that's it, finished. And not only that, but understand how this is a negation of everything that God has been saying to them to this point. Everything that Kadosh Baruch Hu has been doing has been to shape them, to mold them, to make them leave slavery and become a free people, to become a powerful nation, etc. What are the spies saying? Spies are saying, hey guys, this is all a lie. It's everything we've been through. It's a tekes. It's a show. You think you're not the slaves that left Egypt? That's exactly who you are. You are the slaves who left Egypt. That's where you are. That's who you are. And don't think you're going to succeed. And the moment they say that dooms this generation. Because the moment this generation is told, you are still the slaves that left Egypt. You are not a nation. You're not a conquering people. That's when devastation occurs. And what happens? The Torah says that the response to stage 3 is the nation began to cry during the night, that the nation despaired. And yes,
Why wasn't, so to speak, to the question of Kadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe, when Kadosh Baruch Hu took them out from Mitzrayim,
right.
he purposely took them around the long way instead of going because
Correct.
They will,
So they won't fight with the Plishtim and right.
So he already knew what type of people he was
Okay,
dealing with.
very good, very good. When this is the point that he's raising is that if you look at the Torah text, when they left Egypt, the Torah says that God took them the long way around because he was worried if they went through a particular country that they would see war and they'd turn around and cut, just go back. Now, two answers to that. First of all, maybe God doesn't want them to defeat the Plishtim because they don't deserve, that nation doesn't deserve to be defeated yet. But probably the most push-up-shot answer would be, that's where they are as soon as they're leaving Egypt. We would hope by the time you get to this moment that that's not the same people. And what the spies are saying, and this really underscores what I'm saying to you, what the spies are saying is you are those people. You're not who you think you are. You are the slaves. All right. And that and what's fascinating, of course, is that what do the rabbis do? They take a look at the calendar, they count days, and they say that the night that we cried over Ched HaMeraglim was what? Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av. The Egel was Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av is, and what we're really being told is, by that connection, is that every time we lose faith in ourselves, every time another year passes where we don't fulfill our destiny, we're repeating the sin of the spies. The sin of the spies is a seminal event that will cause damage over and over again if we commit the same crime.
There was a paradox quickly that in the early 20th century, there was a big story. The secular Jews wanted to come back to Israel, and they did lots of things to get here because the religious, and it was exactly what happens here. They didn't believe in themselves. And after,
all right,
from two sentences, after World War II, when 5 million Jews, you know what happened.
Right.
4 years later, the United Nations accepted what the secular Jews were wanting to do to give us the land to come back.
Interesting. All right. So you're saying that this repeated itself, and what we're saying, it repeated itself at that point. Right. Look, we're hoping that that's what's happened to us. It has. Thank God for Israel. Because if we look at what's happening in the world again, it could happen all over again.
That's the only way we would have gotten here initially. And
right.
Now you have one sentence. 60% of the see how Israel's looking now. It's like 50 or 60% say that this is our country and we need to
defend it. Right. Okay. All right. So
we can defend it.
Right. We are able to do so. Yes. All right. Now, and this is the last comment I'll take now because we're.
Not enough.
I don't know who says this, but that one of the reasons the spies did what they did was they didn't want to lose their positions. They were
again. All right. These are various.
They didn't want to. So you could say the same thing applies today. People are afraid to lose their money and their big houses.
All right. Well,
so they don't want to come to us.
We're not going. Okay. That is an interpretation. It's not the push-up shot. All right. It's an interpretation that the spies were high up on the echelon and they were basically saying we want to still live in the desert. But push-up shot, they are simply coming back and saying, you're nothing. That's it. You're nothing. And because you're nothing, you're not going to win. Now, what? We are nothing. Yeah, that's correct. Correct. These were nobles. These were important people. 100%. They were putting themselves together with the nation, saying we're nothing. Now, next, let's go fast because I have a number of things to say. Yeah.
Is it possible they were referring to something else with midot, as in the way they carried themselves on treating each other?
Could be. Anshe midot can be interpreted in a number of ways.
And in that way, they could have seen that they put Bnei Israel to shame.
Okay, that's interesting. that's a bit of a stretch, but it's good. It's good. It's pretty. Anshe midot, that they had good midot and they put Bnei Israel to shame. Interesting. Unfortunately, sometimes I say when I have interactions here in Eretz Israel that we should work on our midot a little bit. All right. Anyway, let's go on. And yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't want to.
Why should we be surprised that the spies reacted this way? In other words,
We're not.
I know. So why have the idea? Once you're like a general, like Moshe, God,
basically,
why send them in?
because we're coming back to plan A and plan B. Hashem is challenging us. And the answer is this generation is not up to the challenge. And they have to learn that. They have to see that. In other words, if, let's say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took them out of Egypt and said, hey, guys, I just want you to know, you're not up to the challenge. Your children are going to go into the land and you're going to die in the desert. Right as he takes them out. That you're not giving them an opportunity. You're not giving them a chance. So what's happening here is they're being given an opportunity. And unfortunately, they're turning it on its head. Okay? Now, take a look at Hashem's reaction here. And this is very, very telling. Vayomer Hashem salachti kidvarecha. Hashem says to Moshe, I will forgive them according to your words. This bottom of page 4. V'ulam chayoni v'yamalei kvod Hashem es kol haaretz, but as I am God and my glory fills the world, ki kol anashim, all the people who've seen my glory, all the people who saw those miracles and turned this around the way they have, they are going yiru es shpati lavosam kol menatzai lo yiruha. These people are not. This generation's not going to enter the land. Now, God says, Solachti. If this is God's forgiveness, I think I would turn in and say, please, God, forgive someone else. Right? Well, how does this, what?
Forgiveness doesn't mean no punishment.
Forgiveness doesn't mean no punishment, but it's a forgiveness for what they, how are they being forgiven? In other words,
They can carry on.
that they can carry on. Well, I think it's deeper than that. This is the first point where intergenerational success becomes viewed as success within the Jewish experience. In other words, what they're being said is your children are going to go in. And as they go in, that will be your success as well. In other words, and to prove that, when we get to the point in the Torah where the Torah talks about the division of the land and how it's divided up, the rabbis point out that what has to happen is the land has to be divided not simply according to the number of people that are going in, and not simply according to how many people in a particular family at that moment, but rather it has to reflect back. It becomes very complicated. We're not going to go through the details, but it has to reflect back to the previous generation and then go back to them. So therefore, what would happen in the computation, in the actual computation? So what you're saying is, I'm carrying that generation with me. And that's really what we looked at. Has that not kept us alive through the centuries? The idea that intergenerational success is success. That somehow we will succeed even though we won't be here to see it, even though we may not experience it. Okay, but there's something else. And this, I think, is very powerful. And I remember when I noticed this, take a look at Moshe's argument that leads to Hashem's response, right? Going back a step. Take a look on page 5. Read to yourselves for a moment in Hebrew or in English what Moshe says to Hashem when he's pleading on behalf of Bnei Yisrael. And I'll ask you 2 questions. How many arguments is he bringing? And what are they, or what is it? Or what are those arguments? Or if it's only one argument, what is the argument he's bringing? Okay, so anybody wanna suggest? What?
That the Egyptians will say Hashem couldn't.
He is basically saying, what will the Goyim think? Right? Isn't that that's the totality of his argument? And yes.
But why does Hashem care what the Goyim think?
Good question. Excellent. Right. So Moshe is saying we want to increase your glory in the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is going to cause your name in the world. Part of our job, totality of our job is to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, right? To increase God's power and kavod in the world. So he's saying it's going to fall on its face. And they're going to look and they're going to say you couldn't do this. Now,
He's also using what he was told after
okay. If you take a look at his argument at Chet HaEgel, he brings this argument, but he brings another one as well. After Chet HaEgel, Moshe Rabbeinu offers 2 arguments to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One of them is, what will the Goyim think? The other is, remember your promise to this people, and he's pleading on behalf of the nation. Remember, Avraham, Yitzchak, that is absent here. Why is it absent? Why does he fail to plead on behalf of the nation, as opposed to the case by Chet HaEgel, where he actually pleads on their behalf? So one has to assume that that's because he recognizes their nature, that he realizes that this nation is failing, that this generation doesn't deserve to go in. And he therefore is arguing only on the basis of what? It's going to look bad. He doesn't bring up any merit, any positive dimension, any positive argument about the nation. Now, take a look again. What does Hashem say? Salachti kidvorecha. What's superfluous in that statement? Right. What do you mean kidvorecha? Hashem should have simply said salachti. He's turning to Moshe and saying, I believe I'm going to forgive them according to your words. In other words, you're just saying, what will the world think? You yourself have no argument to bring forward to their positive benefit. I will forgive them based on your argument. And what will happen is the next generation will go in and the world will see my power. But this generation is doomed. And he therefore is mirroring, it would seem, Moshe's own limitations in terms of arguing on behalf of Bnei Israel at this point.
Hashem himself, in his response, sees to hint at that by saying, Hashem nishbati la'avotam.
Right, correct. In other words, I made the promise to them. He's bringing in the positivity. Correct, but Moshe doesn't. Moshe doesn't. All right, yes?
It could also be that Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov loved the land. So, Yaakov wanted to be buried in the land.
Right.
Abraham went to the land.
Correct.
He can't bring that because this is the contradiction, what they're doing.
All right. All right. Now I want to take everything we're saying, and I want to plug it into the calendar for a moment. All right. Take a look at the calendar, and most of us don't recognize this with the strength that we should. Let's start with a question, and that is the phrase "Vayomer Hashem salachti kidvorecha." Where does that appear in our liturgy? On Yom Kippur, and on the days before and after, throughout the Slichot prayers. Throughout the prayers on Yom Kippur, we say Slichot as well. And that, now, wait a minute, hold on a minute. What? I'm sorry. On a Tanit, right, on Slichot, correct. But in particular, it's repeated over and over again during the, now, wait a minute. This phrase connects to the Chet that led to Tisha B'Av. It doesn't connect to the phrase, to the Chet that led to Yom Kippur. Why aren't we choosing a phrase from Yom Kippur? Why are we choosing a phrase from Tisha B'Av? So the answer has to be that Tisha B'Av is part of the journey towards the Yamim Noraim, right? What do we have? We have 3 sorrowful weeks, and then we have the Shiva de Nechemta that lead us to the Yamim Noraim. The Shiva de Nechemta leading us to the Yamim Noraim connects the Yamim Noraim to Tisha B'Av and basically says that's where it started. That's where, even though the Chet HaEyel came first, for you, where it's going to start with a Tisha B'Av type of failure. You're going to fail to see if you fail to see your value, then it won't work. And in a sense, what Hashem is saying to us by that phrase is, I can only see for you as far as you see for yourselves. Salachti kidvarecha, I'm forgiving you according to your vision. And the farther we see ourselves go, and the higher we see ourselves go, the greater the forgiveness, the greater the opportunity. The limitations we place on ourselves will cause limitations in God's response to us as well. Salachti kidvarecha, very powerful phrase. And I believe it's not just rooted in the sin of the spies, but it's rooted in our own experience. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, as far as you see yourselves go, that's the limit of how far I can take you. And really raise your sights. And that's why it's mentioned over and again in the Yom Kippur prayers, because he's saying, raise your sights so that I will forgive you with greater strength. Okay, so that hopefully brings us to the close of our analysis of the sin of the spies. I allowed for more questions and comments this time than I usually do. I hope I hope I didn't get on anybody's nerves, but you all had a lot to contribute, so I'm glad I did. All right, question.